So, right, so good morning. Welcome to our November-December edition of Book Club. I've had an extra week to read this month's book, so hopefully you all used it well and got through. It was quite a long, or quite a big book, but I don't think it was that long. Did everybody get it finished, or a few people halfway through? Dave shaking his head. So
yeah, pretty much finished it.
A good chunk through. So, so I listened to it once and read it once. So, well, I say when I read it. Once you've listened to it, it's quite easy to speed read, which is quite good. So obviously, this is your first book club, Dave. It's the first one you've been to. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So welcome to you. So really, book club is all about giving us that sort of focus to actually get a book finished. Each one slightly different topic. This one is probably more like the Phoenix Project that we read a few 2 books ago. But every book that we get, sometimes I started this one and thought, not sure this is adding anything, but by the time I'd sort of gone through the notes, there were some real gems in here, which I really sort of, I'm glad I did read it in the end. And I know Steve's read it, and somebody said to me the other day that it's one of their favourite books. So it's really good to know there's some really good stuff in there if you dig, and keep an open mind as well. So we're all about sort of getting our learnings, because my learnings will be different from your learnings, and share what we get out of each book. So our book is The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. I suppose it's Ries, really, isn't it? Eric Ries. And a little bit about Eric. He was a software engineer, joined the IMVU, which grew very rapidly, and then they sold that, and then he became sort of a venture capitalist advisor, and seemed to cover a lot of ground in the 10 years between starting as an engineer and actually writing the book. And he has got another book out there, The Leader's Guide, as well. So I think quite good on the public speaking tour as well. So there were 4 key parts to this book: part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. Actually, no, 3 parts: part 1, 2, and 3. And then it's sort of a bit of a sort of epilogue at the end. So and welcome, Clive. Nice to see you here this morning. So Bruce, let's start with you then. So part 1, vision. 4 key areas: start, define, learn, and experiment. What's where did you find the golden nuggets in this chapter?
Hello, everybody. So if it was in this chapter, so my learnings were around having learning experiments, not sort of starting with a sort of a grand vision and then planning it all out, and trying to plan what you'd be doing over many months, but as an alternative, starting by doing things in small increments. So starting by putting a work package together where you could perhaps test your hypotheses, and then that would be a short increment. So based on the learning you get from that, would then influence your the next step. So then the next step would be to refine that, and then do another experiment, and then that way you're learning from the customers that you're working with, and hopefully you can steer the company on a journey that's really going to be beneficial. You're not going to end up developing something that's you think's a really good idea, but nobody else does. I think that was probably my key learning for the whole book. But
it was a good one all the way through, wasn't it? Fail fast. Really sort of try things, test them, and be prepared to fail, but take the learning from that failure and adapt quickly. I think that was a big theme throughout. The one thing from the book, I thought when I chose it, I thought it was going to be a little bit more about startups generally, all small businesses. It was very focused in the tech sector because that's obviously where his experience was. So one of the key things for me was taking that out of that context and putting it into any startup business context, for, electrical business, sort of manufacturing, sort of engineering business like Clive's. And if you think back to when, you all started your businesses, relating some of these things back then, I think is a really good way to sort of see it in action. How quickly did you pivot? Did you learn to sort of change things? Some people just sort of persevere and just keep going till they get through. But I see businesses out there that I've got this great idea, and I'm really sure this idea is going to work, but they're sort of almost scared of failing, because if they fail, they know their idea then's rubbish. So they don't really put it out there and push it. Where his whole thing is, no, you've got to get it out there, you've got to get it tested, even if it's not ready. Get it out there, and the world will tell you whether it's good or not. So what about you, Clive? What did you get from this sort of first chapter on vision?
I sort of thought that, as you stated, I thought generally a lot of his examples were based on sort of the tech industry, and I think a lot of what he's saying throughout his book is probably more relevant and easier to sort of evaluate and these small business models, this minimal value products are probably more relevant in the sort of tech software tech sector than they are in other businesses. But there's basic there's the basic sort of principles. Without failure, you can't grow. And this whole thing of validated learning. What you're doing relevant? And how are you measuring that? And so from that point of view, it set the scene for the for the rest of the book, really. I in some respects, sort of, I did find it quite sort of, is to say, it was, I thought very much sort of in terms of the high tech sort of sector. Which
I think it's right, but I think I was trying to think of it from other cases, and your smart air product is perfect for this. This is it's a lean startup. It's everything, the stages that you go through for this in a sort of a software business would be the same in developing your hardware.
I'm not saying it's not relevant to us, but I just thought that a lot of his many of his examples throughout the book, there was the odd one or two. I think there was a laundry business, and there was sort of a few others, but most of his examples were based on his InView, and what was the financial company, Intuit, wasn't it? He did a lot of. He'd obviously done a lot of work for them, I think.
Cool, good. So Andy, what about you? What came out of that first chapter?
Yeah, I must admit this is one of my favourite books as well. I think there's a lot of value to be gained from this. So it's not the first time I've read it. I think the definition of a startup is quite nice. As you mentioned before, it's not necessarily just a small fledgling business. A startup can be a new project within a government organization or a massive company or what have you. I think also it's interesting, the definition of what a startup isn't. If you're doing something that has been done many times before, then you're not a startup, even if you have just started up.
Right.
But if it's a franchise or something like that, then the reason that you've chosen presumably to buy the franchise is because you believe that essentially somebody's giving you a blueprint that works, and so that's not a startup. I think it can be applied quite broadly. I thought the MVP types that he gives is a very useful illustration. Just things like producing a video or trying to get people to sign up to something before you've necessarily implemented it, or whatever it is. The concierge startup, that's one that kind of really stuck in my mind from the first time I read the book. And when people ask me about the book, that's one of the things I often relate to them. Say, well, it's really about challenging yourself to say, how can I answer these questions with the absolute minimum effort? And if the alternative to building a big complex software product is to just go and do it manually and see if anybody wants it, then that's a great way to go. Was there anything else? I suppose some of the thoughts around the psychology of it, the perceptions of it from third parties, be that investors or higher level management or whatever, this sort of audacity of zero. Until you've actually launched something, it could be the next biggest thing, because there's no evidence to the contrary, but then there's no evidence that it is either. So
that really did make me smile, that having a zero is better than having a low number. Because you haven't quite, if you have a low number, then it proves that most people aren't interested, whereas zero means you probably haven't got the message out there well enough.
And then that leads really nicely into the innovation accounting stuff, but I believe that's a later chapter, so I won't talk about that.
We'll come back to that, and the vanity metrics as well, which I like that one as well. So Chi, anything you want to add to part one? Oh, you're on mute, Chi.
Sorry, yes, I was on mute. So I went outside to grab Cassie. There's a lot. Obviously, the minimum viable product. Obviously, there's lots of things that we've been kind of having a go at subconsciously, I suppose. Having read the book, it's like, we've been doing lots of this year, kind of experimenting. I did the bit. Obviously, he talks about Toyota quite a bit as well, and their kind of lean models, and there's quite a bit to learn in terms of having those leaders there that look after the project in its entirety. That's something to kind of take through. Obviously, been doing it, but a little bit with people, but obviously defining that and creating that greater vision around that person to say that, you know, they're gonna deal, they're gonna look after the project, not necessarily me, I suppose. You know, but yeah,
I think ownership of it is, you know, is key, and that continual driving of it through. Certainly, you know, in most of our businesses, you know, if we do have a startup, you know, Clive's, you know, great example of this, you know, invented a new product, you know, really got massive potential, but the day job, you know, of actually delivering the normal service gets in the way of actually developing the new product. I think that's where a lot of us are sort of stuck on the budgets and the resources that we've got to hand, that we've got to put enough resource into it to keep that momentum going, to keep testing, keep measuring, get the feedback, learn from it. Otherwise, it's, you know, I'm not sure if it was in this book, but somewhere else it said, you know, the world is full of ideas. You know, what we're not good at is the implementation of those ideas. So it's, you know, it's having a champion of it to keep driving it is, you know, is generally is a key part to it. So, what about you, Dave? This was my little list of the first chapter. And anything from that you pulled out the first part?
Yeah, as I say, I was agreeing with a lot of what everyone else said about it, about the vision, the idea, making a try at whatever you want to do, and preparing to fail. Thing that stuck with me out of that so far the most, and it was quite early on, was about the box. That we have everything ready in the box. You know, we have the fuel, we have the ignition, we have everything we need. It's just having that fire.
Yeah, yeah.
Making it all come together at the same time.
Yeah, that was a good analogy, wasn't it? You know, I've got the tinder, I've got the firewood, I've got the spark, but, you know, I just can't get the darn thing to work.
Yeah.
So what actually really does give it that boost to get it off the ground. So
yeah.
I think, you know, there's a big part comes across that there is an element of luck in this. You know, right place, right time. you see something that works and you exploit it. You know, so for every one that succeeds, there's hundreds of thousands that fail, and that's why that fail fast is so critical. So, but so that, I mean, those were the sort of the 4 parts: start, define, learn, and experiment. You know, with a start is really having that sort of, you know, vision and real belief in what you're trying to do. I think the definition of the problem is the key. A lot of us come up with ideas of, here's the solution, but if we can't define the problem, it's really difficult. A very nice guy sort of gave me a lift to the airport, and I sort of asked him what he does, and he sort of, you know, went on and I said, I do this, 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 but I can't get anyone to actually, you know, buy what I'm doing. And I went, well, what's the problem you solve then? You know, you've got all of these solutions that you do, but you're not actually defining one problem that you can go and actually solve. And I think that was a sort of a case in point with this. If we just focus on the solution all the time and no one's got that problem, then we're never going to sell anything. You know, all people really care about is the problems that they've got. So we have to define what that solution is. So, and then, you know, 0 is better than small, and we talked about that. You know, and we do have to think big. You know, we've got to keep thinking of, you know, where this could go, but start small. You know, prove one part of it, get something working, gain some traction, momentum builds. You know, you're never going to come in straight with the final solution. Look at you know, where Apple started, where Microsoft started. You know, all these big companies all started right at that base with you know, solving a very, very small problem and then building on it. So whereas the ones that try and come and solve, you know, global warming and, you know, the one big thing will generally fail because it's just too big to deal with. Any final points from part one? No? So once the thing's sort of up and running, you know, we've got it off the ground, as it were. We've then got to sort of look at steering it. You know, where's it going to sort of head? There was some, I think, some real key ones to this, or that's what I put there. So, so Chi, what did you get from this part then? How vision leads to steering?
I did this bit so long ago. I've completely lost where I was. Oh, I suppose, yeah, there is, yeah, obviously covered some of this a moment ago. Obviously, you know, fast failing, you know, getting quickly to, you know, obviously, you know, the MVP, getting it there, and then obviously, you know, getting to kind of the dead ends and kind of dealing with those bits. Obviously, you know, being entrepreneurial about it, and pushing, you know, pushing that. Well, I suppose that's the bit that I kind of got out most of it.
And that, you know, that leap of faith was that first step. You know, is at some point you've got to just get behind what you believe in and give it a go. I think he talked about the Facebook side of things then, didn't he? You know, handful of college campuses, 150,000 registered users, you know, they just sort of have that belief. You know, sometimes it's a blind stupidity, I think. You just sort of blind faith that, yeah, this could work. And then you sort of, you know, you jump and see what you can, you know, what you can pull out of it. Clive, what about you? We talked about the minimal viable product, which I think was really key. With too many people wait to build something perfect before they actually launch it, and you've just got to get, you know, something that's good, just good enough, and then learn from the feed. Be prepared to, you know, have people complain about it. It doesn't do this. It doesn't do this, because that's your feedback of what people then want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole theme again throughout the book, the build, measure, learn is what you're obviously trying to do in the minimum, in the minimum amount of way, spending the minimum amount of money, and but in actual fact what you're doing is the whole reason for doing that is to learn, to measure, and then build properly. So you know, you've got the one side of it, you're building minimum, you're using that to measure and get the feedback, and then you're then going backwards and doing using that feedback to build better, to eventually get the product exactly right. And I think, I can't remember the scenario, but he mentioned that you know, there becomes a point where you know, you can no longer use the build, measure, learn scenario, that you've then, you know, building a product that's just good enough is actually not good enough. If you're going to the broader market, the product's then got to be right. You can't have all of these issues. You can't have the minimal viable product. You know, because then if you start then pushing that out in the thousands and hundreds of thousands, you'll end up in that spiral of it all going horribly wrong. So yeah, that was it. You know, again, an interesting philosophy that you're, you know, on the one hand, you know, you've got to have that strategy for the minimal viable product to do your innovation, but then you've also got to switch to put that into lean production to actually start building what your customers want properly.
Yeah. So is that your early adopters are quite forgiving because they have the belief and they'll forgive you. The mainstream, when they come on, they don't think the same way. So if you're still in that MVP stage when it does go mainstream, then you've got problems. But in the early phase, yes, it's good. It's a good part of the build process. So you don't want it out to everybody too soon. You want it out to those key people who are going to work with you and help you develop it. So
I thought it was quite funny. There was a scenario that was talking about Toyota bumpers, and the lean, the lean sort of supply chain. And he was talking about, this might have been further on in the book, I can't remember, but he was talking about holding minimum amount of stocks, and he said, oh well, if there's an issue with the product, you don't want to be holding hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of stock. And I'm kind of thinking, well, if you've applied what you're saying in the book, then you should have, by that time you're making the hundreds of thousands sort of thing. You should have ironed out all your problems, and you shouldn't be making a product that's got a defect. But it all sort of
So, cool, good. Andy, so anything for you? What did you make of the analogs versus anti-logs?
I'm trying to remember what that bit was now.
On page 83.
83. I remember seeing that as a title as I was flicking through just now, but I forgot what it was. Oh, yes. Yes. So this is sort of informing your, so rather than when you consider your assumptions, some of those assumptions you can actually validate just by looking in the market already, isn't it? So this is, did Apple need to validate that people would, listen to portable music players with headphones when they made the iPod? No, because Sony had already done it years earlier with the Walkman. So they knew that wasn't something they had to prove. So I think that's a nice way of thinking, but also because I think it helps you to, you've got to identify what your assumptions are, and you've kind of got to unpick them, because it's not always obvious. You come up with a product idea and then say, all right, well, what assumptions have I taken in order to get to where I am, and to think that this might be a good solution to this problem. If you can kind of unpick it and say, all right, well, I can tick that one off straight away, and I can tick that one off, then you can focus on really drilling down into proving or disproving those assumptions that are left. Other stuff in this section, he talks about the build, measure, learn cycle, and then later on in the section he talks about sort of expressing company's runway in terms of the number of pivots they can make.
Yep. That was a good one, wasn't it?
I think that's a very helpful way to think about it, because essentially you might get lucky, but chances are you're going to have to pivot a few times before you hit on something which really takes off. And so, yeah, being able to get around that loop as quickly as possible is really key. Yeah, this was also the part where the innovation accounting stuff was introduced from that. So yeah, that's quite interesting.
I did like the heading of page 115, you know, why something as seemingly dull as accounting will change your life. How rude.
Yes.
Rude.
So. And yeah, I mean, around sort of how you achieve that is interesting. So, you know, split testing and kind of building that sort of feedback into the product. So, you know, don't just put something out there if you can't, you know, if you don't have a way of measuring, you know, what people think of it and how it's performing, and, you know, you've got to build that in from the start. What else was there? Oh yes, and your sort of your experiments and your metrics need to be actionable, accessible, and auditable.
Yeah.
To kind of keep everyone on the same page and kind of avoid any arguments. And there's a useful list, I think, of types of pivots as well on page 172, which yeah, I think that, you know, if you're at that point, you're kind of thinking, oh, what do I do now? Or, you know, should I be reviewing this? Just going through that list and thinking of the, you know, the different options that are available to you, and, you know, sort of the zoom in pivot and the zoom out pivot, and the, you know, change the target audience, or change this, change that. It's just quite useful to kind of run through that and yeah, apply it to your scenario.
I think, you know, to me, seeing people's, you know, people who've tried to launch products, I think the failure to pivot is probably one of the biggest factors that they fail. You know, that they say that blind belief that, oh no, this will work, and not listening to the customer and going, right, you know, I've got, in effect saying that I will have to pivot in this, accepting it, and how quickly can I pivot? And as he said, you know, how long's the runway? How many pivots can I afford to make before my money runs out? So, I think that was really good. So Bruce, what about you with because the one that I love was the vanity metrics. So that we get hook up on the wrong numbers. You know, that we look for the numbers that make us feel good and try and prove that we're right.
Yes. Yeah.
Like web hits. Yeah, it's one thing with marketing companies. Is always, well, how many hits has your website got? Oh, it's got 50,000 hits. Yeah. How many sales have we made? Or have made any? Yeah, we've got 50,000 hits. You know, you've got 14 million, you know, likes and followers, and they make you feel good, but yeah, they're not really sort of, you know, telling you much about what's happening. So
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I don't remember. So yeah, I guess that seems, you know, fairly obvious. So yeah, you need to be looking at the right things. But I thought the, you know, bit on the split testing, you know, was interesting in that, you know, one of the challenges when you're looking at your numbers is, you know, there's a lot of factors behind it. It's not necessarily just your product. So perhaps the timing of it, maybe the season or the weather, or, you know, some of the external factors. So so on the split testing, if I remember rightly, that was all about, at the same time, actually offering, you know, maybe a couple of have a slight variation on something, so you can see, you know, how each performs. So when you're looking at your metrics, you know, you can, you know, because the timing was the same, there shouldn't be any influence, you know, through external factors. So yeah, I thought, yeah, that was good. And yeah, I know that companies like Facebook, you know, they're always running different news, different parts of the world, or, you know, even in the same part of the world, you know, you can get slightly different experience because they're always testing and trying things out. Yeah, and when they launch something new, they might just launch it in a very small area, and then if it's successful, it goes out, but they can roll back if it's not working well. Yeah, it's quite fascinating.
I was told by somebody once that New Zealand is an area where they launch a lot of products.
Okay.
Because there's, I think, is it 2 million, 3 million sort of residents in New Zealand, but it's very densely populated. So and it's quite broad type of people they've got there, so they can launch it there, and if it goes wrong, they can contain it quite easily. If it gets right, then they go, right, well, it's worked there, therefore it's got a good chance of working in Australia, America, and the UK. Good. Dave, are you able to talk? Are you?
Yep, I'm back in for a minute.
Okay, good. So anything from you from this sort of, sort of this section, leak test?
I'm not very far into part 2, Kevin.
Okay. So
I seem to be a bit behind everyone else. I've only just finished the Phoenix project.
That's all right. Plenty of time over Christmas to catch up. So
yeah.
But I think the key essence of this one is is be content with failing. Look to fail. If you do something and you get a 0, then that's good news, because that doesn't work, and you're one step closer than something that does work. Whereas a lot of people just have that fear of failure, and if I do that and no one likes it, then I'm going to feel bad, and that just stops you in your tracks. So and it is that sort of, do I pivot, do I persevere, what should I be doing? Pivots require courage. You've got to sort of want to, because it is brave, leaving all that work you've done, all that cost that you've put into a particular product, but everything you spend is a sunk cost. You can't get it back, it's done. So you've got to treat every day as a brand new day. So what would I invest in, knowing what I know today? And try and leave that sort of past behind. Get too many people that say, oh well, I invested in that machine, I've put 50 grand, I bought that machine for 50 grand, and I can't lose it, I can't sell it. Well, it's done, it's gone, cash it in. So same with stock, people hang on to stock because I can't sell it for what I paid for it. Well, if no one's buying it, it's got a 0 value. So if you can realize it for something, then it's still worth doing. Cool. Anything else from the steer section then? No? Okay. So our part 3 was then the accelerate. So who wants to talk? Bruce, you can talk to us about small and large batches. Then that was a bit of a sort of.
I thought that was entertaining. I remember at school we were doing some sort of. I think we had like a special week all about business, and on one day we did some manufacturing, and it was actually comparing this small versus large. And this was obviously a long way back, but the test we run actually. We were doing better on the large batches, which was quite interesting because we'd actually done the test, and he's obviously saying that people think that the large batch would be best, but in practice the small is better. Yeah. But I remember when we were children, we tested it, and for us the large was better. But I do accept that it's not just I guess the speed or productivity. It's things can go wrong. So obviously if something goes wrong and you've done a big batch, then that's really not great. So I'm not necessarily disputing the productivity. It's probably correct, but Yeah, it was just interesting that we'd done the test when we were small and it was a business lesson and we came to a different conclusion.
Yeah,
But yeah, definitely doing small. Yeah, it just allows you to react. So if there is an issue, yeah, you can stop everything, get it right, without having lost too much, and then start up again, and away you go. So don't know what else is there to say, really.
I think the fact that you did it at school, that's pretty good. We didn't do it that exciting at school. But I think that what it sort of reminded me was that you sort of naturally think as you ramp up that batch, doing it in large numbers, is the way. It's going to be more cost effective. If you do it in volume, then you'd think it's going to be more cost effective. I think the thing here is don't just have that blind belief in it, because the small batch size actually can be more effective. And if you go back to the Phoenix project, when he talks about the bottlenecks, large batches can create large bottlenecks. So if you're starting to see bottlenecks, pinch points, then I would then sort of say, well, perhaps look at the batch sizes and, are you doing too many? And I suppose if you think about, go back to Toyota and, they're sort of just in time, that was removing of batches, we build the whole process so that one bumper gets to us just in time to fit it onto the car, rather than the Ford way, which was you mass produce your thousands of bumpers and you have them sitting there so that you can call on them when you need them. So I think
it's
interesting. A fine balance.
Yeah. I think certainly on the Toyota sort of manufacturing line, how they've got that cord they can pull and everything stops, and you just think that surely that's just not going to work. But actually, it does. Because if you allow other bits to carry on, it's just going to cause potentially a real sort of management problem. They're just stopping everything, focus all your resources on getting that fixed, and then away you go again. It's a lot simpler from a management point of view, and I guess they've shown that on average, it works a lot more smoothly and they're more productive. It's quite I know it must be quite scary in that situation. You're there and somebody pulls the cord and you're, oh shit, what's gone wrong this time?
Did they have it in one of the James May or Inside the Factory? And they actually he actually said if you pull that cord, the whole factory stops. And he actually pulled the cord, and it literally every conveyor, and then people just sort of standing there waiting. But what it did do is everyone came over, to see, look, actually, okay, you've got a problem here, let's help. And because the worry is, people then will pull it for no reason. And because if you go back to your own businesses where you've got that person or group of people that don't really think, they just go, oh, Dave, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And that's a bit like pulling the cord, isn't it? As soon as they ask you, it's like stopping the whole process, and that's really irritating. But I think there must be a change of belief in an organisation like that they see, well, actually, it's obvious that I'm stopping everything, and therefore I'm only going to do that if I really have to. Whereas in our businesses, when they come and interrupt us, it's not obvious that they're stopping the whole process going. So maybe that's something we should all do, is have a big, you can ask any question you want, but you pull this cord, and a big red light comes on, it goes, woo, woo, and I'll come and sort your problem out. There you go. Try that one out. Let me know how it goes. So, Chi, what about you for the grow part then? The sticky, viral, and paid.
Good question. Was there a bit on that? I have no idea.
Anybody remember the
engines of growth? stuff.
Engines
So
of growth, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So I think sticky growth was things like where you've got lock-in. So you buy your printer, you've got to keep buying the print cartridges, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that's not a great example. It's more where you kind of got to keep buying the products and it's difficult to switch away. I think he gave an example of a database company. If once you've decided which database you're going to use, it's very hard to change your product to use a different one. And then viral is things like Facebook, where you've got something that's maybe got a bit of a social element to it, people invite their friends, and before you know it, it's kind of taken over the world. And then paid is just where you pay for marketing of one form or another, and that gets people to sign up. But the key thing there was to analyze that what you're paying is less than the value of that client that you're getting. So those were the engines of growth.
Yeah, that was the the Action Coach, acquisition cost versus lifetime value. If you can acquire a customer for £1 and the lifetime value is £100, then you spend as many pounds as you possibly can. So the interesting one, I used this with a client yesterday, actually, on the viral one, and I loved the graph on 214, the R factor, which is obviously very poignant with COVID at the moment.
Yes.
Because we were talking about the growth of his business, and he was looking at sort of the vanity metrics, which was the number of people that used his what he was selling. And obviously COVID had gone down, and he'd had a really good spike post-COVID, and he's going, oh, look at that number, that's a really great number, and should I really back this number now, and next year could that number go really increase. And I said, well, yeah, but we'll be careful here, because that might be just a vanity metric on COVID, with bouncing back and people just buying this stuff. Let's look at what really is driving the growth here, which really is your repeat business. Because if they all come once post-COVID and you don't see them again, then you're not going to grow. So we looked at the number of repeat users, which for him was 20% of the people that buy are repeat. And then we looked at one of his competitors, or say another venue, and they were at 45%. So I said, that's your issue, is you can continually run at 20%. So your R factor is really 1, because for every one you lose, you gain 1. For every one you lose, you gain 1. So your membership has stayed pretty sort of static for the past 10 years. You've got to overcome that, and you've got to get them to be more sticky, or more viral, where they will sort of, they will refer 1 or 2 extra people to come in. Until you can sort that one out, then forget the headline figure of how many people use you that day. That's not the key metric. The key metric is your repeat business. So I really like that, and Chi, that will be sort of for you on the online side of things. What's my repeat? What's my R factor? So how many people are, for every person drops off, how many people am I getting on? Am I growing that part of the database?
I think the metrics right now are really challenging, in the sense of, trying to see dig through to the real meaning, because, I was speaking to a customer recently, and they were saying, well, all of our competitors have run out of stock. If we launch this product, people will buy it, just because you can't buy any others. So you can sort of take your metrics from that and go, oh wow, look, that's fantastic, it's just going to keep on growing and growing. But you've got to realize that at some point your competitors are going to, you know, solve their supply chain issues, and suddenly you're potentially going to take a step back. And you know, I mean, this guy was very switched on to that, and was already thinking ahead. All right, well, you know, I can launch this now. But then, you know, when the competitors come online, actually, I've got a plan for, you know, how I'm going to have some unique features in there in order to make sure that I keep growing. But it's very easy to fool yourself.
Yeah, it's kind of, it is a tricky thing. Obviously, yeah, we're experiencing that as well. There are shortages, and yeah, you will get, especially online, there will be spikes when people can't find something. They look harder. I guess I guess that's part of the viral part. I guess you know, people are going, you know, looking, hunting things out, and I suppose it's capitalizing on that information that you get. Is use that later on to kind of drive the, you know, to drive the repeat purchase, I suppose. And that's the tricky part. I suppose you know, if you're in a business where, you know, people have to come back, potentially have to come back, or can come back, you know, like food, you know, you can, you know, you can't just, you don't just eat once. You're going to need carry on eating, but obviously there is a choice out there. You don't have to eat, you know, Asian food. You know, you can buy other things, but it's really tapping into that once they've known where you are. As I said, you know, one of the things that we were challenged on is kind of stickiness of customers. You know, if they've gone to one online shop, well, how do we get them, if it's in their bookmark that they go to a specific site like Sainsbury's, you know, and they always go to Sainsbury's, how do you as Tesco's get them to go, well, actually let's go to tescos.com instead? You know, because there's just no way of, yeah, how do you pull those people away from doing what they used to doing? I guess we're kind of creatures of habit. Let's pull them and say, well, look at something else. I suppose, you know, having shortages is a good thing, because then people start hunting at that point, and then, well, then you've got your opportunity.
Cool. So, Clive, what about you from adapting then? So what's...
Yeah, I like that. You know, I thought that was really good. His analogy, you know, his analysis of the 5 whys and sort of versus the 5 blames. I certainly that's something I'm you know, going to try and implement within R&B, but it was interesting to say that you need to be very careful about how you initially apply that if you're you know, if you're fairly new to it. So obviously, while we've got a problem, you know, somebody's done something wrong. Well, why have they done that wrong? Well, you know, they didn't know that, or they didn't look at the procedure. Why didn't they look at the procedure? Well, they couldn't find the procedure. Why couldn't they find the procedure? Well, because they hadn't been trained, you know, to look for it, or so. And I think that was a really useful you know, analysis, and certainly something that would be really useful for us moving forward. And again, you know, but it needs a lot of a lot of control in terms of, if I think he was saying that you've got to get the whole team involved as well. It's no good just getting the managers. You've got to get you know, the operators, the supervisors, the managers to understand the complete problem, and then obviously be very careful that it doesn't go into a blame type of situation. But I thought, yeah, that for us, I think that can be really useful.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I did see it many years ago, not in this context, in a more of a coaching context, so it's a good way to really dig deep into what's really going on, because the first answer you get is a superficial answer. It's a quick, sort of perhaps a blame, excuse, and denial type answer. And then if you keep asking the why question, you actually get down to what the root of the problem is. So it's not just in this context I've seen it. It's in in many contexts.
Yeah, I think he used the analogy of that. Eventually it went down to the filter on the oil wasn't sufficient or something. There was grit coming in, and that had caused the bearing to fail or something. So really interesting.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you look on page 230, why did the machine stop? There was an overload in the fuse plug. Okay, we'll just change the fuse.
Yeah,
and we're not solving the problem. We're putting a plaster on it rather than actually finding the root cause. So it's that ability to really dig deep when things go wrong to find out, well, what is it? So, and the 5 blames.
What in terms of sorry, Kevin. So well from again, it's as you said, it's very easy that if you're in that group environment, it becomes, oh well, I was told to do that, or he did this wrong, or they did that wrong, and it's very it's crucial that you look beyond that, and it's obviously not the blame culture that you've got to be very careful that doesn't get it doesn't degenerate into a blame the blame sort of culture.
I think that is the key word there is culture. That if you're going to do this, then bring the 5 whys in the training into the culture. Get everyone on board with it. But because he talks about where blame inevitably arises, the most senior people in the room should repeat this mantra: if a mistake happens, shame on us for making it so easy to make that mistake. So it's not right from the top. It's not about blaming the person on the machine or that particular person. It's right. We need to solve the issue for this. And I think a really good book around that particular item, which was the Checklist Manifesto. I don't know if anyone's read that one. Might use that as a book club book. But it's all about the aviation industry versus the health industry. And in the health industry, it's very much a blame culture. And sort of, it wasn't my fault, and trying to hide from the truth. Whereas in the aviation industry, if a crash happens, then they pretty much ask the 5 whys. Well, why did it happen? There's no blame. Which is why, have you watched Scully? Miracle on the Hudson, where Tom Hanks flies the plane, lands it on the Hudson Bay, and that's a real great example of where that breaks down, and they forget about looking for the why did it happen, and looking for somebody to blame. So it's a good real shows that and there's a sort of a twist there where it switches from one to the other and then back to the original sort of way it should be done. It shouldn't be anyone's fault. It should be what is the root of the problem. So, cool. So where are we? So it was so facing unpleasant truths was part of that. Point of 5 ways master. Somebody that's it's their job to go in and ask those questions.
It's a proportional investment side of it as well, which I thought was interesting.
In what respect, Andy?
So, you take the example of, oh, it was this, and at the end you go, all right, somebody needed more training. All right, so what are we going to do about it? Are we going to, set up a new, induction training program for everyone that comes along, and we need to find somebody to implement that, and it's going to take them 6 months to create all the training material, and so on and so forth. It basically, the kind of proportional investment thing is all about just take the first step, and that needs to be obviously proportional to the impact, but where you've got something that I suppose the first time it happens, you don't maybe you don't really know whether it's a systemic issue or whether it's just bad luck or a freak occurrence or what have you. Then actually just say, all right, well, let's not do a whole training program, but let's just take a day to put a couple of things in place, a checklist maybe or something like that, and just use that process of the 5 whys, and then and just incrementally improve each time something comes along.
Yeah. Cool. So, but he did caveat it with, he said, don't send your baggage through the 5 whys process.
Yes.
So if you've got something that's really bad, then it won't work for that. So use it wisely. So where would you get to? So that was adapt. So the last section then, innovates. So this was really about, and he did allude to it after the growth phase. He says that every business will run out of growth when engines run out. The truth is, every engine of growth eventually runs out of gas. Every engine is tied to a given set of customers. At some point, the set of customers will be exhausted. This may take a long time or a short time, depending on one's industry and timing. So it is that, you've got to be aware and be looking to spot it. And at that point, you then need to switch back into the innovation side, and then sort of say, right, how do we, how to nurture disruptive innovation, So any points for you on this one, Chi?
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it's a necessity, I suppose. Yes, we do run out of steam. You'll get to the top of where you are, and you'll need to find some other way to find other. I suppose it's like having cash cows. There'll be an element where there'll be bits of business that don't really get any better, but they'll keep producing revenue. But in order to kind of grow that business, you have to go and look at alternative markets or other things that I suppose like Tesco's, going from the larger stores to smaller stores, having Tesco's Express. It's a way to kind of get that next step. For us, it was going online. That was a way to kind of grow that revenue. Kind of going to new destinations. It's just being prepared to kind of innovate, I suppose, and just keep moving forward, knowing that you're going to run out.
And that sort of the protecting the parent company, so create sandboxes, put it in, and in a way, I suppose Andy and Bruce, that's what potentially you are, isn't it? You could be a sandbox for your clients. So perhaps you should send a copy of this book to everybody, and then highlight the last chapter, and say, why don't we let us be your sandbox?
not not entirely convinced. I mean, I think, well, I mean, there's different aspects to the sandbox, aren't there? I think one element of it is it's around protecting the parent company, which can include things like launching it under a different brand, or restricting it down to a particular sector, or what have you. It's as much about not so much about the development of the product. It's perhaps more about how you bring that product to market, how you position that product, how you avoid that product from impinging on the sort of parent company's other business. I mean, I suppose potentially that's maybe something that could be outsourced to a degree, but yeah, it's definitely not just about development.
Yeah,
at least that's my reading of it.
Yeah. So it's that sort of, I mean, it is looking outside, and realizing that this growth will end, we will plateau. So, what are we going to move into next? I was watching actually last night. There was a thing on McVitie's. Do you want to see that? And they were going through, so I suppose it was like it's not inside the factory, but it was inside the mind of the organisation, and how they invented. I was probably too young. Clive and I might remember, but they launched a biscuit called the 54321 back in the sort of, I think it was the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And I do remember it. Yeah. And it was out for.
I remember the advert.
Yeah, because it had the song, didn't it? 5, 4, 2, 1. And they sort of launched it, and it was because it was their competitor to Kit Kat. Kit Kat had sort of that chocolate bar market, so they launched something that they thought would be better than the Kit Kat, and they did all this. They launched it, but the problem, and they had five ingredients in one bar. So there's 5 things that made this thing up, and all of the staff said you can't put 5 ingredients together and make it work. And they just it was 5 ingredients. We're going to make this thing. So they made the bar, but when it got hot, all the ingredients would separate. So it ended up, they called it the crocodile effect, and it basically split and looked like a crocodile. So it was only actually out, I think, for 9 months or something before they pulled the whole line. So all of that time and effort went into building it, and then they pulled it. And then they went on to talk about, because their biggest sellers were digestive biscuits and rich tea, but they couldn't trademark the name digestive or rich tea. So everyone was doing a digestive biscuit and everyone was doing a rich tea. So that's what then it made them innovate and create the hobnob. Because they basically built the hobnob so they could trademark the name. So that was that in action, So they had to pivot. All that money and effort goes into the 54321 bar, and then they scrapped it and switched resources over to the hobnob. And
very nice they are too. Especially with the dark chocolate.
I said, and he said, he said it couldn't help but be resistible because it was so full of fat and sugar that no one could actually resist it. Good. Bruce, anything from you from that sort of final section?
Yeah, well, I guess we've touched on it already, but yeah, I think you've really got to be continuously innovating. You also have that mindset. But yeah, the book, we touched on it, sort of talking about the sandbox. So it needs to be ring fenced in various ways. You if you've got a team, they're not going to have unlimited resources, on a particular innovation project. So there needs to be bounds to it. We've touched on ensuring that it doesn't do damage to the rest of the business. I think they talk about having sort of ownership of that project. I think that various things talked about, the experiments you're running, making sure that you're looking at the right metrics, and it's all sort of similar sort of concepts to what we were talking about earlier. Really, a lot of the lean concepts. I suppose, you just got to be continuously thinking about the next thing, but it's a separate. You've got to separate it, so it's not going to damage your current product and your current what you're currently doing. But don't just feel that what's currently working is going to always work well forever. So just having little experiments on the side that are well controlled. I think it's essential really for any business really. If you're going to survive for the long term.
I think, and you look at the business failures that there have been. The majority of those, the ones that haven't adapted, they haven't innovated. They had the sort of the golden goose, and they just sort of bled it dry. And when the market changed and when the customer changed, they just left them. It's the companies that do adapt and change that are going to be there long term. So,
I think you mentioned about like the sort of innovation culture as well, that you sort of having that within the company, so anyone can potentially have an idea and sort of bring that idea forward in terms of, it might be a good idea, it might be a shit idea, but it no idea is a bad idea initially, and you've then got to start that process, that innovation process of within the business. So having that culture is important for
Okay. Cool, good. So, any final points, Chi? And what would be your biggest takeaway and action as a result of the book?
I guess the 5 whys. I think that's important. I think we're too quick. We're still quick to kind of just walk away with just blaming someone else, and not really finding out why things have gone wrong. And understand where the failings are. I don't think we're not going to get any better by using the blame, by blaming other people. That's I suppose that's the motivation for the company now is to be better at what we do all the time, and understand that there are things that do go wrong on a continuous basis, and by continually asking why things are, why are these things done this way? How can we get it to a better state? Just to work on that, and also do things on the and said you got this small batch, large batch thing, and we have to there are certain things that we have to be prepared to kind of do in smaller quantities. Versus large quantities. I used to sell very small quantities of chicken, knowing that lots of people eat chicken. I now sell large volume of chicken, but that's I guess it's being able to pivot as well, and that's one of the things we've learned through this last couple of years is by being able to pivot, understand that certain things lead to other things, and just be adaptable, and being prepared to pivot. And getting your feet wet, prepared to fail as well. Not everything succeeds. There are failures. We do things and they don't work out. one of the things is you can spend large amounts of money on Google, but not necessarily that brings in the business. Other things can, doing other things can help as well. So
yeah. So cool, good. So Andy, what about you? What was your biggest takeaway and actions as a result?
I think the concept of validated assumptions is quite a key one. That's something that I have tried to use in the past. It's something I think I definitely need to persevere with. It's not, a lot of these things that he presents in the book sound great. I have been in the position of trying to apply them, absolutely they have value. Absolutely, they are worth striving for, but they're when they hit reality, they're not always that easy to apply to every project. But yeah, definitely worth trying. That's probably the main one, and just accelerating that build, measure, learn feedback loop.
Yeah. So, cool, good. Clive?
Yes, likewise. I think from similar to Andy, applying the the valuation, getting getting more customer feedback about sort of the potential new developments and products and ideas that we've got. And I think the other thing that, again, similar to she, is the 5 whys. That's certainly something that I think going to try and implement, sort of, as they suggest, in a smaller, so perhaps one of the project review meetings will look at some of the, one or two of the issues and apply that the 5 whys and see where that leads.
Yeah. So cool, good. Bruce?
I think the small versus large thing. I think sometimes we we put strategies together and try and put plans together, and they get sort of more and more detailed, without actually sort of testing the water. So I think getting more into a mindset of having an idea and then thinking what is the minimum, the shortest way that we can sort of verify that this has got some legs in it. And we could apply, maybe I'm sort of thinking about marketing at the moment. We can, rather than putting a lot of effort into trying to set up maybe a new marketing campaign and having all the building blocks to support that campaign, testing the water with something very simple to see maybe a few alternatives and see which ones attracting interest, and then build on that and build on that again. So I think that'd be good. I think historically we've been often quite isolated in our thinking, so we're almost in our own black box trying to imagine what the world wants, what the customers want, and not talking to our customers enough about or basically putting propositions out to the marketplace to see what's really wanted. So having more focus on that. So having small exercises where we can actually find out what people really are looking for. And that is going to apply to all sorts of things in practice. We've been in business a long time now. I think we celebrated my 21-year anniversary this month at IT Dev. So, and some things we've built a model of business, and some things we've just done year after year, and you think, well, do our clients really want those reports or that type of report or this type of there's all sorts of questions, and maybe there's more we could do to actually find out what they really want. Or that's part of the challenge is we have quite a broad customer set, so perhaps yeah, some of them want different things, which in its own that is problematic. Maybe we should be a bit more specialized or service a narrower market rather than having a broader one where we're doing something different for everybody. But yeah, I've got various transport, but yeah, generally the small versus large is the thing that resonates to me, and I guess sort of testing water and building on that.
I think it's one of the key things from that is, we're always in startup phase. There should always be an element of us that's still looking for the next startup. No matter how mature our business is, we're either in that phase or we're not in that phase, but a part of our business should be in it. I think, G, you've done that, really well. But with Andy Bruce, you're looking at those things as well. Clive, you've got that with Smart Air. But the big thing it always takes is time. If you don't have the time to focus on it, and if you're always busy, then you never, that's the one thing you're never going to get involved in. So you do need to be a certain size and structure, I think, to be able to then do that and give it its due that you need. And it's probably a message for those businesses that are a little more mature and perhaps been sort of plodding along for a while, that well, what is their next startup phase going to be? And I've always thought, that's the exciting bit in any business is that sort of startup, that getting off the ground. That's where the fun can be. Maintaining a business isn't as enjoyable. So always be growing. If you're not growing, you're dying, as they say. Good. So, well, thanks for your contribution, guys. It's been good. The next book is a bit of a classic. So I read this many years ago. A real sort of had a big impact on the way I did my sales and marketing. So I'm looking forward to rereading it and getting more out of it. I'm going to put this at the end of January, so give us a good amount of time to read it over Christmas, because obviously there's other things that are going to get in the way. So I'm assuming everyone's up for that book, so I'll get Jane to send that out to you all, so you've got that ready for next time. And then we've got the workshops, sort of sales, the normal workshops coming up in the next few weeks. But the final one I wanted to just sort of bring to your attention was the BizX. We've got the date for that is now out, 31st of March and the 1st of April of this year. It's going to be in Farnborough, so actually fairly local to us. And speakers, we've got Claire Balding is going to host it, so it's quite good. And some speakers we've got so far: Chris Voss, which was Never Split the Difference. So that was obviously one of our book club books. So it'd be good to see him speak. No idea who she is. I'm hoping she's pretty good. Tony Alessandra, he's the guy who I say invented, but came up with the disc profiles that we all use. So Assessments 24 is him, so it will all be about disc and communication. Stephen Covey is the son of Stephen Covey. It's very original when you name your son the same name as you. But his book is The Speed of Trust. So sort of takes the work that his dad did and sort of moves it forwards into a relationship thing. Obviously, Brad's going to be talking. Ian Woodhouse, I haven't come across him. Kevin Whelan is all about wealth builders and business valuations. And the one Jane's looking forward to is Noel Fitzpatrick, who's, if anyone watches the TV, Super Vet. So he's the guy that rebuilds animals, so gives them bionic legs, and so he's pretty awesome guys, but amazing practice. I think it's over in Surrey way, and I don't know about those. I might go and have a cup of tea when they're on. I'm sure they're good, but and there's more to come. So please, if you put the date in the diary, the booking link will always be on my Monday email, so I'll be putting that on there. Have a look, and if we want to, I know Bruce and Chi went many years ago when we could do face-to-face stuff. If you remember back then, so it'd be good if we had a few of us going up there to learn from some of the greats and share that knowledge, but also the company of other people. Subject to COVID, it will be online as well, so you can dial it if you can't make it. Actually, there you can dial in for it. So, we'll have to sort of see what people want. Good. So it's been a pleasure, guys, and I will see. Hopefully, I'm seeing you all in some shape or form next week for either shooting Only Fools and Horses or 40 Towers. So look forward to celebrating a bit of Christmas with you next week. Until then, take care and have a good weekend.
Kevin.
See you later.
Thanks very much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.